All right, everyone, welcome tonight. Tonight will be even more fun off the cuff than normal because it's a focus not on our normal apparent audience officers, but on enlisted, who Stephen has repeatedly told me we need to, remember. So this is my attempt to tell you, Stephen, we do remember the enlisted soldiers. They will not let us forget them.
I'm still gonna
So
troll.
So I'll start here. I have Joe, then Zach, then Steven up here on my screen. Gentlemen, if you could just introduce yourselves, kind of talk through, briefly what you did in the military and then where you're at now, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I guess I'll go first. I'd be remiss if I didn't correct the record right away and say Marine, because if I don't do that, I
Oh,
will
I am
be,
sorry.
I
I am
know,
sorry.
excommunicated. I did leave my red crayons somewhere. I can't find them right now. But other than that, so Joe Murdy, been out of the military since 2015, enlisted in 2007 after an adventurous path through undergrad, meaning that I was awesome at college, terrible at education. Basically slept and drank my way through my undergrad experience, and
Sounds
really
right.
probably need that discipline thing for myself. So joined the Marine Corps in 2007, ended up with 1st Reconnaissance Battalion, and served in Charlie Company, 2nd Platoon for 2 deployments, one to Iraq, which in 2008 was more of a humanitarian mission than anything. And then in 2010, pushed over to Afghanistan. That was a very kinetic deployment. Actually ended up taking a high caliber bullet through my helmet, not my head, thankfully. So that after that experience, I re-enlisted with the hopes of going to Force Recon at the time. That did not happen. I ended up down at dive school in Florida. So spent 4 years as a dive instructor, teaching SOCOM and reconnaissance Marines how to dive, and then decided it was time to get out. And at that point, went back, finished my undergrad at 30, or went back to school at 30, and then we'll get into some of that later. Graduated at 32. Working with 18-year-olds was that had pitfalls in itself, outside of the military. And then spent some time with Newmont Gold Company in their strategy group, and some time at a startup while working on my master's, and finished my master's. And I'm now with Boost Mobile, which is a subsidiary of Dish.
Nice.
Great.
Hey, I'm Zach. Go ahead, Steven.
Yeah, Zach, go ahead. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so hey, I'm Zack Gardner. I was in the Army for collectively about 10 years. I was a 11 Charlie, so that is a smart infantryman, for those of you who don't know. My career, my path to the Army, a little similar to Joe's, it sounds like. I enjoyed college as well, but I thought I wanted to be an officer. The Army didn't think so, though. So after 3 years, they kicked me out of ROTC and said, well, now you're an enlisted soldier. So that's how I ended up, there's my scholarship became a loan.
Were you a UCF grad, Zach?
Yes, I was.
Yeah,
No
two
shit,
of
me
us
too.
on the, yeah. I just remembered Steven's also UCF.
Yeah, UCF, nice, very cool. Yeah. It took me a while to get the UCF grad status, but so, went down to MEPS and like, cool, you can be a infantryman or a cook, needs of the Army. I was like, I don't like cooking, so off to the infantry I went. Mainly in Germany for 3 years. Went to Afghanistan for a year. Did not get a high caliber round through the helmet, so I'm doing better than Joe at this point. It was a medium deployment, wasn't nothing crazy. Came back. However, that deployment enough was like, maybe I need some college back in my life. Wasn't so sure I was going to be doing the 20-year enlisted lifestyle. And when I PCS to Stewart, I had an awesome command team. Shout out to Reamer Argo and Aaron Bullard, like two best company leadership I ever had. And they said, hey, go ahead and re-enlist for stabilization. You can go back to UCF full time for 6 months and finish your degree. So they let me go down there, knocked out about a year's worth of classes in 6 months. Came back and slowly went through and finished the rest of the classes online, and finished my degree while I was still on active duty. And then got out, and in the process of me transitioning out, Amazon came a knocking on LinkedIn and was like, hey, you're a bachelor's degree holding NCO. You want to come work for Amazon? And there I did. So I've been at Amazon for almost a little over 6 years. I'm sure we'll go through my Amazon career and where I'm at now, but now I'm a senior technical product manager at Amazon. So that's where I'm at now.
All right, and I'll round it out. So pre-Army, I am also a UCF grad. I went there from 07 to 12. I finished with 2 bachelor's degrees, one in microbiology, one in neurobiology. Did a year of med school, and A, hated it, and B, was poor. So I lived in the Middle East, Jesus nowhere, and it seemed like a great way to see the world was to join the Army. So I walked into my recruiter station, was like, I didn't like med school. I want to do things in the Army that are kind of like that. And they were like, cool, be a combat medic. 3 weeks later, I was on a bus as an E1. I didn't realize that I could commission and be an officer. And I didn't really know what an officer was. I just happened to be an E1 with 2 bachelor's degrees. Spent most of my time at Bragg, kind of bounced around overseas a couple times, had a good time with it. Did my 3rd bachelor's degree in healthcare administration while I was in, and then also did a master's degree in epidemiology while I was in, got out in 2012, and got out in 2022 and am doing my 2nd master's degree, my MBA at Georgia Tech. I'm a full-time student, but I go in the evenings for their program at the Scheller College of Business. While I've been out the last couple of years, I spent about a year and a half with Accenture as an associate manager and project manager and consultant, and fucking hated it. Like, consulting was cool. I could not stand that organization for a multitude of reasons, and fortunately got rescued by where I work now, which is a healthcare organization out of Alpharetta, Georgia, called Jackson Healthcare. They own a multitude of smaller healthcare companies that range anywhere from temporary to semi-permanent to permanent staffing agencies, healthcare consulting, an antibiotics manufacturer. Like, they really do a lot in the healthcare space. I work for them as kind of an enterprise project manager. A lot of what I focus on revolves around onboarding new companies into our platforms that we've purchased, like new acquisitions, and then pretty much any project in the HR or human capital management space I touch as well. So I stay pretty busy with that. And then I run a wedding photography, videography, and boudoir brand on the side with my wife. That's our side hustle. So a little bit all over the place.
My side hustle is wedding related as well. I'm a officiant, and I do
Yes.
yeah. So
There we go.
UCF and wedding stuff. We can start a business, man. Really great.
And look, with having a military background, there's a good chance, like, especially being enlisted, you'll have repeat customers.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I was about to say, you guys,
I'm on wife number 2, man. It happens. Like,
I was the same. I had a test run.
Yeah, I'm not remarried, but yeah, I'm divorced. So eventually, it's perfect.
Which was worse, the round through the helmet or the divorce?
No, that was it was actually post-military. Shockingly, I avoided somehow all the pitfalls of staff sergeant and above. I didn't marry a stripper, and I definitely was single for most of my military career. I don't know how I got away with that, but whatever.
Look at you. That's the Lord looking out for you multiple times, you know?
Yeah. I had the DAR site. I had the place, abused Marines came to and had to sleep off.
So, first question I'll ask is probably the one that most people want to know: what to avoid, right? The things that coming out of the military tripped you up. I'll start this time with Zach, then go to Steven, then finish with Joe.
Yeah. One thing I wish kind of both tripped me up, but wish I had done a little differently was I got out of the Army on a Friday and I went to Amazon on Monday and I moved in between. That was terrible. And when I showed up to Amazon, I was still Sergeant Gardner 72 hours prior. And so it was a little tough to not have any kind of break time in between. So walking into a fulfillment center, right, giant facility, and not knowing anything, but literally just have come out of the Army. Didn't even have this glorious beard yet. You know, it was miserable. My first badge photo of Amazon's terrible, and you know, making that mistake, I really do regret that quite a bit. Was one of the first things I think I made a mistake on in my transition coming over to the real world. So, you know, folks coming out of the military, you've done a lot of work. Take a little time for yourself, and let yourself adapt to real life, and you know, just take a break. You know, take that terminal leave you've earned and leave, and don't work. So yeah, I'd say that was my first mistake I made.
I am like, you know, any other interesting person would naturally just disagree with you. And that's fine. It's all well and good because it's so person dependent. So I think
Sure.
my first mistake would have been listening to the way someone else transitioned from the military and assuming that was the right way for me. Because I got out on a Friday and started for Accenture on Monday. And like I was working for Accenture on terminal leave.
Yeah.
A, because I was paying off an immense amount of credit card debt and it helped to have two paychecks. But B, because I know that I need to work, and I figured the best way for me to successfully transition was to work through that transition. And I am, you know, super type A, Enneagram type 1. Like I need to work, I need to achieve in order for me to feel any sort of, you know, emotion related to happiness and success. And all, you know, I listen to the people at the transition assistance program. I can't remember what the acronym is this week. But they were just all full of shit. So I think listening to them on anything was probably my first mistake.
Yeah, the guy that led our it's now SFL Steve.
Yeah, there we go. That's it.
For life.
Transition assistance program.
The guy that taught ours was someone who had been looking for work for about a year and a half. This is how he started. He said, "I've been looking for work for a year and a half. I know how hard it is to get work. Luckily, I was hired as the TAPS instructor."
Jesus.
So that was how we started TAPS. But yeah, love the disagreement there. I think that is definitely dependent and probably can depend on the person. But Joe, why don't you round us out now?
Well, sadly, I think you're getting the
You
same.
have to pick a side.
Yeah, the same three stories because I left Florida on a Friday. I didn't go to work. I went to school. So, but I was starting school on a Monday. So definitely, I'm going to play neutral here. It was kind of a balance of both. I wouldn't say like take forever because I definitely get the whole I need to work like that. I'm an Enneagram 8. So
Oh,
you know,
okay.
I have a rebellious streak, but
Yeah.
I also need to assert my opinion. And you know, if we need to get into star signs here, I'm Aquarius too. So whatever.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, we can stop right there. But yeah, I mean, definitely take some time to feel some stuff out. I think my mistake, honestly, and it's something I've rectified since, getting someone you can talk to outside of even the civilians interacting. So, you know, if it is interacting with a therapist or just finding some practice to be really mindful, because you go through so much and that transition, whether it's work or school, is so different than anything you've been through in the last, you know, 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, whatever. And you're being thrown into it and trying to navigate it, and just having an outlet that's like, I don't know what the F I'm doing. I don't know what the F is going on. I'm feeling this way. Learn to talk about your feelings too. Those are like really helpful things that I wish I knew a lot sooner. It took me about a year or two before I was like, ooh, probably want to like process what's going on in my life and how these things happen.
I feel like one of the most common misconceptions is that the military has a monopoly on stress. I know, you know, like a lot of guys like, you know, these civilians, like whatever, they don't understand, bro. They're working. I can tell you this, we're working. You know, I jumped into Amazon at the peak season, and it was 6 days a week, at least 14 hours a day from you know October until January, right? So you're right. Like you need a you need an outlet because you're going to go into something stressful too. It's going to be a different stress, but you need a valve to blow that stress off to stay sane, so to speak.
As long as dudes aren't like, or dudes, gender neutral dudes, aren't equating working themselves into absolute oblivion with success. Because I did that with Accenture. I would work 16, 18 hours a day because I'd work my team and then I'd stand up a team in India. And I caught myself feeling like I was just as successful as I was in the military because I was exhausted and I was pissed off all the time because I was doing that and then going to class. It ended up being incredibly unhealthy. And that's kind of when I, severed the cord with the firm and found something better. And I find where I'm at and what I'm doing now, I have an immensely or a more successful feeling of myself and what I do to contribute to society. And I don't work nearly as hard. I work better. I'm in a better place. So just don't equate lack of sleep and dedication to a 700,000 person organization that doesn't give a fuck about you with success. And that's that's my soapbox.
It's not assessment and selection anymore. I think that's just it. That's the other thing. Don't self-select out. I think Wyatt and I, in our conversation preceding this, there's some discussion around negative talk, especially I've heard a lot of it on the enlisted side of like, oh, to the point of why we're doing this tonight, like officers are ones with fancy degrees and we're all the dudes with tattoos and go out and blah, blah, blah. I'm never going to be corporate or anything like this. It's like, don't self-select out of jobs. You can get into the same education, you can get to the same colleges, the same master's degrees, you can climb the ladder. Things are a little different. I mean, I could rough and tumble my way out of certain things if I had a disagreement. You can't exactly punch a coworker in the face if they're disagreeing with you, but
even if you want
learn how to navigate.
It's okay to think about it.
You can think about it. Exactly. Yeah. But that's just it. Don't self-select. And I think too many people get this like, oh, I don't want to do 4 years of school, or, oh, I don't want to pursue this. And it's like, look, it's a little bit of pain for a lot of gain. The numbers are out there. The payoff is not just incremental. Your lifetime earnings, your ability to, I don't care if you've maxed out your TSP, what you could do at an Amazon or any of these big companies in 5 years, if you're driven, is going to outclass anything you do in the military. So by tenfold.
What would you guys say, exactly like you were talking about, to the young enlisted soldier? He might be an E5, he might be an E7, it might be like an E4 that's thinking, hey, I've done 3 years, I really like this. It might be someone, like some of you guys that had done 10 to 15 years and thought, hey, this might not be the path I want to follow forever. Where should you start to think, and when should you start to think, that obviously the military is kind of an all-encompassing kind of job, and it's very difficult for a lot of people to let go of that identity and not feel maybe guilty about moving on. What would you say to, soldiers that are starting to think maybe this isn't the thing I want to do and become a sergeant major? How do you, balance that with the desire to like still do a good job and like not drive yourself crazy finishing out your enlistment, or just deciding not to sign back up? Maybe Steven start, and then we'll go to Joe and Zach.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that going to college and advancing your career in the Army are not mutually exclusive. Like I did my first master's degree while I was enlisted. I started as an E6. And to be totally honest, like the reason I got it was pretty much sheer pettiness, because like I had one officer that was like, oh, well, I have a bachelor's degree. And it's like, all right, well, I have 3, but now I can say I have a master's degree to trump you. So yes, I got it out of pettiness, but it still benefited me in the long run. Like I picked up 7 very quickly, probably because of that. So I think encouraging your team to pursue options in and out of the military on a coinciding timeline is totally appropriate. And you're a fool if you don't use the benefits you're given. Because yes, you will not be able to do a 4-year degree in 4 years with just TA alone, which I think is stupid personally. But shit, man, use it. Like it's there. Like, you're paying for it, you're paying taxes, burn that shit. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. I would do it at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, and if the joint's not, op tempo, it's just not possible, but that you've started to have that feeling. For me, it was when I started hurting, so like I'm waking up, it's like, I can't do this forever, like I'm one bad fall away from crippled. So what else do I want to like take away from my career? And what can I give back? And, do your research. I think that's the other thing. TAPS in the Marine Corps was just a joke. I mean, I showed up day one. Their question was, okay, who has a job or who's going to college? I raised my hand. Okay, cool. Come back Friday, get your signature. That was my TAPS class. So I got leave for a week when I was supposed to be learning like skills. Like, awesome. Thanks, guys. Understand like education programs that are available to you, whether it's concurrent while you're in or when you're getting out. A lot of guys worry about money and pay. It's like the GI Bill now pays you so much money while you're out. I mean, you'll feel it a little bit, but you can do that. You can do grants. Sometimes they can be completely released at the end of them. Like, there's a lot out there. And start thinking about like what you're passionate about. I'll never discourage people if they want to go back to school and be a physical therapist, if that's what they're interested in, but understand that the amount of stuff you can do, you can go back and get these education at top-notch universities, and you're not going to have a lick of debt that most of your peers are going to be paying off for the better part of their 30s. Whereas, one of those junior enlisted, if they look just a little bit ahead, do a little bit of planning and find networks. This is not just, hey, go find something like Sit Reps because it's the coolest Instagram page and we really enjoy our memes, but find those networks out there and talk to people, be curious. And, most of the people that have successfully transitioned are not going to keep, they'll give you all the good things, all the bad things, and you'll figure it out. So.
Yeah, no one's gatekeeping over here for sure. Like, I'm a similar vein of the two you guys. I would say even if you are unsure, the earlier you can start, the upside of, for one, I don't care who you say, bachelor's degree is the bare minimum these days. You want to be a cop? Most cities, big cities, require you have a bachelor's degree. Or if you don't, they're going to incentivize you to do it. Firefighters, same way. All these different jobs. The bachelor's degree has become like the bare minimum to get a lot of roles out there. And the upside is the first 2 years are the same for everybody. So if you're on active duty, slowly chip away at those core classes, right? Not use that TA, go through them. The other thing you could do, there's a bit of like the gaming the system. Like, there's that the ACE, the college equivalency deal, like where they take your military education and assign you credits. I ended up getting like 25 or 30 credit hours, just reduced from what I had to do to finish my bachelor's degree, just off of like stupid Army course. Like infantry mortar leader course gave me a geometry credit that counted towards a math class for my undergraduate degree, right? So, if you're on the debt, like, hey, I want to, you want to get out of the Army or the military in general, see how you can leverage the current educational resources to bundle it all together. You'd be surprised where you're at by the time you're ETS in or EAS, and how many credits do you really have to do using that GI Bill to finish off. I was able to position myself where I finished it while on active duty, and now I have the job to kind of do something else with. So the education piece is first and foremost. Yeah, and then talk to the we've all been there. There's a bunch of dudes in the military who have crazy life experiences before they join the military. Talk to them, figure out what they did before they got there. Like, do you have resources in the organization? SFL TAP is trash. It'll be trash until the day we all die, right? Like it's a government organization. Things like American corporate partnerships, they have some great resources out there pairing up with mentorships. There's a lot of mentor organizations. Meet some people and make connections. Like, that's kind of you're allowed to not know what you don't know and not know what you don't want to do, and that's okay.
And there's also a lot of options outside the realm of college, because, like, let's be real, like, a lot of dudes join the Army to get out of college, which, like, I feel I'm just a huge nerd and I love it, and I want to make sure that as the 3 or the four of us sit here and say college, college, college. That's not the right answer for everybody. And it's negligent to think that. There are a lot of trade related options out there as well, which the Army does have programs for. Like, I know a handful of welders that make more than I do, and more than likely we will for a long
Sure.
time. So it's, if someone's watching this and they're like, well, fuck, man, I don't like to go to college, or they have a learning impairment, or they just don't want to, like, the Army has lots of options for trades as well that are incredibly successful. So think about that. It's still education. It's not, your traditional, like, listen to a professor education, but like, it's still furthering yourself using Army resources that you don't have to pay for. So college is not for everyone.
It is certainly
Lots of
not.
options.
And there's also options like, so take Amazon, for example. My old VP, he doesn't have a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
He started as a box, box puller. I started off as just a box loader for Amazon. Was my first, like, I was the manager of the box loader people. That was my job. I just loaded boxes all day. That's it. That was for 12 hours a day. Anyway, I hate Instapots, by the way. I will not buy one because I've personally touched about 12,000. But he started Amazon. Amazon is a program where if you're a associate for 2 years, you can go to a interview loop and promote on through, right? So we have super senior folks who don't have bachelor's degrees. I guess my perspective though is a bachelor's degree is never a negative, right? So like, even the trade schools, a lot of times they may or may not have prereqs, but there's welders, there's gonna be a math component, right? You have to understand how the physics of things work. There's always an educational component. So there's never a downside to starting early and learning as much as you can, right? And yeah, there's plenty of trade kind of options out there for sure. But don't let benefits sit on the table because you just don't want to do it. Yeah.
How would you guys talk to enlisted soldiers that come out, about discussing your experiences, and how do you just leverage the experience you've had? I've already said to us, I think before the video started, a lot of civilians don't have a clue that there's a difference between an enlisted soldier and an officer.
And that's great.
And
it's great.
Fantastic, right?
Yeah.
You'll come out and they'll be like, so like, they know what a colonel is and a general, and they've heard of a sergeant. Most have no clue like what a lieutenant is versus they don't know what an NCO does.
Yeah.
And trying to explain it using E3 or O4, like this, but how would you talk to enlisted soldiers that are coming out and maybe they think, man, I was, especially nowadays, maybe they haven't deployed, or maybe they did deploy and they just feel like, hey, I don't want to amplify my own self too much, right? There's other people that did more than me. But you still have to know how to tell your story. What would you say to enlisted soldiers about how to figure out your narrative, your story, so that when you go into interviews and they start asking you questions, or school, or whatever it might be, you can speak to that. Maybe we'll start with Joe again and go Zach and Steven.
I think the important thing there, I learned early on, kind of what you alluded to, learning to say I accomplished, and not having imposter syndrome when you walk into everything, because you're coming to get out of this super regimented organization of like, I'm enlisted, officers are this, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, first off, that gap is closed. You have guys like Steven that have more bachelor's degrees than their officers. And I love the pettiness of going and getting a master's too. He probably got a war college. Master's at some point too, so you could really make fun of him.
It was probably like AMU or something along those lines, like some sort of like mail-in.
But I think it's learning to get rid of the imposter syndrome first and foremost. Like, you've accomplished a lot, enlisted or officers, so don't put things in that regard right off the bat. Second, learn how to also leverage the military network. And once you're out, there's, unless you're ring knockers, and even them, they'll hook it up. Like, just talk to your fellow military, your other vets, and build that network. Everyone is willing to help. Like, it's not, again, the gatekeeping goes away right away, and just help yourself by being confident in what you're doing. And I think the other is just, be curious. I can't stress enough. Like Zach, you hit it on the ball, the nail on the head. If you're back in school, your first 2 years are going to be the same. So don't be afraid to look at a bunch of different things. Even if you're going to a trade college, like maybe you get into welding and then you get interested in underwater welding. I don't know. Like there's just going to be a lot there for you. Just know that you belong. And I think that's what I always try and reinforce, and have the experience. Like I was 30, I played on the rugby team at DU because I found out rugby stops your eligibility when you leave the military or when you go into the military. So I was eligible to play for 2 years rugby, and that was one of my outlets. I got to go hit 18-year-olds for better or worse on a rugby field. And the best insults I always heard was like, why do you look like my financial advisor? As I like crushed the kid. So those are just different outlets, different ways to kind of blend in. Don't think you're better than the school experience. You didn't get to do that when you were 18 years old. Enjoy it a little bit. And just take it for what it is.
Yeah. The upside of people not understanding the military is it plays to your story, right? Like short of you being a SEAL, an F-18 pilot, or an astronaut, I don't know, maybe there's what's the next biggest military movie? Unless you're one of those dudes.
Green Berets.
A Green Beret, right? Like something that is absurdly recognizable. They have no idea the difference between a armor company commander and a infantry platoon sergeant versus a medical section sergeant, right? Or even just a team leader, the vast majority of people have no idea what the differences are between those. And it's great. And you play that in your favor because you just talk about your experiences. Now, if you're a E4, right? Don't apply for the job that you're the director of operations for a 50,000 person company, that's geared towards some general officer that's going to be sitting on a board just collecting a check, right? There's a little bit of a common sense thing kind of going on, but generally speaking, there's no real functional difference in jobs from let's call it the E4 to E7, E8 range, the O1 to O5-ish range, right? Everything outside of that, you have some specialties going on, but it's all basically the same. And they care about what you can bring to the table, not like what tab or badge or thing you have. So, and then once you're in, pass the wealth, right? Like once you're in the company, get involved in like the veterans organizations, do military recruiting and hiring events, and once you're there, plus it helps you too. Like once you're in the company, to a certain extent, having other people have gone through the transition that understand it, it's good to make friends. I'll say I regressed aggressively today. My finance manager, he was a medic in the 82nd. He got out as an E4, and we were like, we're in public, we need to stop talking like this. It was atrocious. But it's nice, it's nice to have some little regression time and whatnot. So there's other people who have been through this, and no one cares. Yeah, it's good.
Don't use acronyms either. I'm guilty of that all the time. I think I said SA the other day, and someone looked at me like, was that racial? And I was like, SA. Oh, yeah, you don't know what situational awareness is. Never mind.
Don't use bluff. No one knows what bluff is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we should provide a list. Acronyms not to use because no one gets it. Yeah.
Yeah, the amount of things that we'll all hear, like when veterans start talking to each other here, and they'll start being like, yeah, bluff, man, or like, what was one thing that someone said the other day, or military time, like people start talking, which is like the one thing that I actually think the rest of society should adopt because there's confusion around it, especially like flights and things. But yes, it always frustrates me when I hear vets start talking to people and they'll be like, yeah, man, I think, one thing I learned, managing NCOs as well as like people above me, like O4s, and civilians are like, an
What?
NCO, is that like a, some sort of software package, like an O4, like, what is that? Like,
if you would explain that and use stakeholder management, you'd be really well received. But until you're taught that, you don't know.
yes,
For me,
stakeholders.
Yes.
For me, like instant like, oh, this guy was a vet and can't figure it out is when they sign work emails VR.
Oh,
Yeah. It's like, oh, bro, like, let that go. Like, thanks is a nice sign off for an email.
Yeah.
Like,
Regards is safe.
that's great. Yeah. Cheers. Whatever you
Yeah.
want. Yeah.
Steven, did we get to you on this question?
No, I was neglected, lost, and
Okay,
abandoned.
go ahead before
Okay.
I jump to the next one.
I'll sleep okay tonight. I think the one thing also, it sounds like I'm probably the most recently out of the army at this point, so I'm still figuring my shit out. But I will say one thing I would highly recommend to if I were to have, some little brag babies that got out of the army, I would recommend that they not surround themselves with veterans. Sure, make some connections, but like as soon as you cloister yourself off and say, "All right, I found my veterans. I'm going to live at the VFW and join the whatever it's like a VAG, like a Veteran Alliance group at work," which is not
I've
something
never
did not make that up.
before.
Yeah, I've heard VRG.
Nope.
Is that like from HR? Is that an HR approved acronym, or were you
not
like...
my company, but I have run across that. I don't think it's HR approved. I don't know. It also is irrelevant. But like surrounding yourself with just like-minded people is not a good way to learn how to adapt to your new circumstances. Very specifically, like when I got out, I am not active in any veterans groups. And maybe I should be. So I'm not saying my way is the best way, but I intentionally almost borderline segregate myself from the community because I didn't want to perceive my new surroundings through that lens. I am very specifically trying to observe whatever new environment I'm in from the most organic viewpoint possible. So if your goal is I'm going to get out and I'm going to hang out with all my other specialist buddies, like that's great, man. But there's a really big group of cool ass people that weren't in the army. Like I'm the PM I work with the most at work. Chops it up like we shared, a slit trench at one point. Like he has a hockey background. He gets the team thing. Like dude's my buddy. No military experience whatsoever. And that's okay. And like, I don't tell my story. Like, I am very obviously a veteran. No, I don't wear grunt style. But like, I have a leg sleeve. I got a full arm sleeve. I'm tattooed. I look the part. I get it. And people, I think, receive you more poorly if you say, "Hey, I'm a veteran. This is my story," rather than just like exist and look weird, and then they're going to come ask, and then you can fill them in with information that they want to know rather than bombarding them with random battle stories of Fallujah. So it's just perspective. Again, I'm usually like the dissenter in the group, and I'll take that one.
I mean, I agree with some of what you're saying, right?
Good. I
think
don't want you to
there's
agree with it all because then it'd be boring.
there's a fine line, right? Like, don't the guy, you're right, the guy who you walk into the office and he's still, he's got all the motto shit all the place.
Standing at parade rest.
Yeah,
Sometimes I do that on accident though. I just like forget my hands go there. I spend a lot of time at parade rest.
I still get yelled at for calling people sir and ma'am. I can't. That's some things I just can't.
Yeah, I get that one too.
But when you're talking about adapting to like cultural norms, someone who can bridge the gap that has been there a bit before, one of the advantages of some of these veterans organizations in your company, I'm blanking on the Amazon one. Anyway, the Amazon, whatever the name is.
Amazon's VAG.
Yeah, exactly. Amazon's VAG. The focus on it was two things. It was one, outreach to, get people, like help transitioning vets, but help transitioning folks from the army into Amazon. So like you'd get assigned like a mentor, and generally there were more senior folks that have been through it for a while. The last thing you just don't want to walk into a building, be completely segregate yourself and just be a wallflower a bit, in my opinion, right? If you can reach out to existing organizational structures that have been through that before and have some structure for you, because we're structural animals coming out of the military, you're used to structure. And for me and a lot of the folks that I've seen, and I'm glad it's been super successful for you, but the guys who are on the island struggle professionally as well because they're trying to do both at the same time. They're trying to transition and learn how to be a civilian, but they're also learning how to how to make a pivot table, right? Or learning SQL, or learning how to write a document, which is completely separate from writing a military memo. You're learning all the industry things. So if you are a very singular individual, maybe yours is the right path. But for me, and what I have seen most success from comes from learning by doing, and learning from people who have made the mistakes for you. So a lot of those times the veteran organizations help those. Now, don't get hammered at the VFW every Thursday night, right? Like you said, and
Yeah.
you know, we
I mean,
don't
do it
need to be.
sometimes. It's fun.
Yeah, yeah, $2 beers, right? Our local one doesn't even have a bar. What the fuck is that? Like, I walked in and I was like, why the hell would I go to this place? There's not
Are
even a
you in
bar.
Utah as well, or is that just
No,
Wyatt?
Seattle. It's so weird. Like, everyone's drunk.
I'm in Philadelphia, man.
Yeah.
Oh, you got Seattle, or you got Utah in your blood. Don't even.
I do, but I'm
You got a
I'm
jazz
in
hat on, you nerd.
I do, but I am in Philadelphia right now, so
Whatever.
they definitely have a bar at mine.
Nice.
Zach just offended my grader. It said pivot table. Some ifs and count ifs can do the same exact thing, and it's way more flexible. But you know, that's beside the point. No, and I think for me, what worked, like I got involved at my BRG business resource group at Newmont, and then VRG veterans resource group. They're, you know, they actually throw the veteran in it.
Verge.
I'm a little bit on an island where I'm at. So it's nice. Like I'm far enough away from it that it's not inundated, but at the same time, the importance of mentoring. And I had to learn, I mean, I came from units that were all men all the time, the boys. And the next thing you know, it's like, you're going to manage women. And it's like, or interact with women. It's like, I'm going to have to like reframe how I say things, be more conscious about, you know, some of it's common sense, but some of it is also go read some books, talk to people and be like, hey, I've never done this. I'm not necessarily the most comfortable in this situation. How do I approach this? And people appreciate that because it's that sense of humbleness, and it gives you a way to also, you know, people like to talk about themselves and their experiences. It's a way to get to know others. And that's such a key networking thing and powerful thing to do inside of an organization, is learning to leverage the experience of others outside of your normal groups, because it endears you and it gives you future pathways to other career opportunities. Because, you know, it's nowadays, if you were in the military for an extended period of time or even a short period of time, like you always knew what your career path was going to be. Corporate's the exact opposite. You could start as a, you know, in a technical field and end up in HR if your skills align that way. Like it can, or vice versa. My first boss started in HR and ended up the chief strategy officer because he was a numbers guy, like loved it. And that's what he did. So there's a bunch of different things. So planning on like, oh, it's going to be this really linear pathway, I need to just focus on the people above me. Like, no, you need to be very aware of the people side to side and in other, you know, other directions within the organization. So
I think that's one of the best parts of being out of the military is the sense of freedom and flexibility. A lot of companies, depending on the size, you know, smaller companies maybe less so, but a lot of the larger companies, you have a lot of freedom to maneuver. Like, hey, I don't like what I'm doing in my current job. I don't have to quit to go find something else to do. I can find another role in the company and move around. And that I've found helps. That has helped me, you know, internally to stay like engaged and still kind of liking what I'm doing occasionally and all that kind of jazz. So yeah, being flexible and understanding, like I said, life is not a straight line. There will be, I started off loading, like being the dock manager at a fulfillment center. Now I'm managing all of the cabling infrastructure for AWS in a technical role. Like it,
very cool.
Yeah, I don't know how the hell this happened, but here I am. Yeah. So just be cool with, just roll with it. Be room and don't, and also, you know, the other thing, hubris is a thing. Like we all have egos, and all of us have done some cool things back in the day, and we used to be a cool person, right? Like at one point in our life, there's probably a cool photo of us doing something cool. You're not that guy anymore, which is fine, which is super fine. So just remember that you're not cool, and you need to learn from the people around you, and that's a good thing.
I had to put an extra hole in my belt in the wrong direction, so I feel you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. One last question before we leave. for those that are getting out, and you will run into coworkers that ask bizarre questions or just are really sincerely like, hey, you served, like, what was that like? I remember the first I had an internship last summer, and this kid looks at me and he's like, "You were in the army?" He was a sales rep, so it wasn't like, when I say a kid, he was like 25. Um, he was a sales rep, and he's like, "You're in the army?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Did you shoot anyone?" And I was like, "What?" Like,
You didn't have the
like
heart to tell him you were a meadow.
I actually did say that. I was like, I mean, for me, it was easy. I was like, hey, I actually never deployed, but I was like, hey, I would not encourage you to ever ask someone that question. Uh, don't say that to anyone. And he was like, whoa, oh, I'm sorry. And the VP of sales sat him down and was like, dude, like, come on. This kid was like an HR nightmare in many other ways. But I mean, there are civilians that, might actually be like, hey, what's it like to serve, right? How do you communicate your story of service in a way that's both like, true to yourself, while also being like, hey, there's some stuff that that you don't want to share, you might not want to revisit. Well, being sincere and maybe giving people the benefit of the doubt that you're like, hey, this is, this is interesting to them.
I'll kick
Maybe.
off. I got a funny story on
Yeah.
this one. So I was at the job I'm at now. It was just like I was there for probably a month or so, and I think there was like 6 or 7 of us getting ready to kick off a meeting, waiting on the person that was running the meeting to show up to it. And we were all just sitting around a table, kind of bullshitting. And the person running the meeting walks in and was apologizing profusely for being like 5 minutes late or whatever. And then one of my coworkers was like, it's good. No one here's ever killed anybody. Like, you're fine. And as soon as that came out of their mouth, I felt every set of eyes in the room just periscope onto me. I was like, I haven't done it recently. Like, come on. And it was just a really funny way to like, you're probably going to have those awkward run-ins, and I think it's your responsibility to diffuse them based on the crowd. And like, you can do it with humor, you can do it with hubris. So I think it was pretty funny. But I spent a lot of time on jump status and forgot the question. So can you rehash
How would
that one?
you, yeah, how would you actually, how would you be sincere if someone says, hey, look, like, how was it serving? Or,
Oh, there we go.
you talk, you kind of talk to it a little bit, but
Yeah.
the sincere, thank you for your service. And it's a real thank you, right? I want to know more.
Yeah. I just try to be, I'm a pretty no filter, open and honest person. And I try and bring that answer to whatever I do. And I think it's important for you to understand as a service member that whether the person realizes it or not, they're making sacrifices in order for you to have committed that service. Whether it's as simple as paying taxes, or maybe they sent you your care packages while you were overseas and you didn't even know it, except for you, Wyatt. So it's important to understand that they may have contributed as well, and they may not have ever had anyone to ask these questions before. Also, you have to understand that a lot of them probably have some what we would call scar tissue from dealing with idiots that have served in the armed forces that they've had to deal with throughout their career. My buddy I work with now has some training scars on the phrase battle rhythm. Like, he used to work another PM gig and was surrounded by dudes in the army. He's like, yeah, they'd always talk about fucking battle rhythms and they would just never do anything. They would just say battle rhythm repeatedly. So like, they may have some experiences with vets that are not positive. And now I just use the word battle rhythm to traumatize him further, for my own pure enjoyment and spite. So just understand that people may have varying perspectives, just like I'm sure vets have varying perspectives on their service.
Yeah.
I think that's all I have.
Yeah, I've always used the term, it's like anything else, some days are better than others. Like when people ask, like, what was it like? I was like, yeah, some days are better than others, like almost any other job. But I normally know, if it wasn't for it, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. I 100% credit the Army for where I am right now. So I try to frame it in that regard. I have never had the "have you ever killed somebody" kind of question. I imagine I would also diffuse it with humor, because that's normally like feels like the safe go-to, and also why, probably like you did, like pull them off to the side later on and be like, hey man, you just don't know what people have gone through, so try not to ask those
Oh, I
kind
know,
of
I didn't do
questions. Yeah, you were just like, fuck
I encourage it. Let them
it. So yeah, I mean, I feel like that's just like the safe way to handle it.
Yeah. I think for me, a lot of it comes down to one, I always think for the support. I think, Stephen, you pointed it out, like you don't know what someone is. And the fact that they've said, thank you for your service or whatever, like it's easy to roll your eyes at it, but it's like they're coming from a genuine place, or I want to assume they're coming from a genuine place. So being genuine back is meaningful. And then, yeah, I always kind of put it in terms like, I was lucky enough to serve with the greatest dudes and see amazing things. I saw some awful things, and, but it was important to my formation. Whenever I get, because the moment people hear Marine Corps, for whatever reason, they're like, oh, you guys are hardcore. I'm like, we just have a pretty uniform. That's about
Yeah,
it.
you do. Jesus, it's
You
so
do have
nice.
the best uniform.
It's so uncomfortable though.
It's annoying. Good.
But at the end of the day, it's like, oh well, if you ever, and it's just like, look, the way I think about this is I'm probably wanted in a few foreign Arab countries, so we'll just leave it at that. And yeah, the humor is usually the way to go with it. And when their eyes get this big, but I had, my boss that I studied about was the numbers nerd. He was hilarious. We had a M&A deal going, and the bankers were getting a little rambunctious out of one of those firms in New York. And he was like, look, if this goes poorly, he's here to throw you through a plate glass window. So I was like, well, wait, why did I get designated this? Like, do I look like a terrible person? Like, no, you're twice as big as everyone in the room. So yeah, go figure. It's like, all right, cool, thanks. So I think it just depends on the group and who you're with, but know your surroundings, like kind of look around and see how people are reacting to you, and have fun when you can have fun. I think humor is the best way. It disarms people, and it endears you to them, which is important
for sure.
Yeah, I think it gives you an interesting perspective too. Like so I report directly to a VP. She's awesome. Love working for her. She'll always kind of start our meetings for all of our PMO teams. Like, how are you? What's going on? I was like, I'm good. Like, I slept inside last night. I didn't sleep in the rain. My boots aren't, I have dry shoes on. I have dry socks on. Like, I'm fine. So it's kind of the running joke is that Steven's okay because he slept inside last night. So I think like bringing the perspective that we've all done things that sucked way more than going to a corporate get hell. I go to work like one afternoon a week. The bar is low for my level of happiness. So just appreciating what you have now, that doesn't negate the fact that you can appreciate what you had prior. But I think enjoying where you're at is important. And I think Zach, you said that earlier as well. So yeah, perspective, all perspective.
Yeah, if you hate your job, don't do it. Money's important,
yeah.
But like there's a lot of jobs out there. There's a lot of jobs. Like people, like it's tough. It's a tough market in general, right? But with both perseverance and skill, like you can find something that makes you some money, and is not miserable. Like sitting in your car drinking, before you like walk into the house, kind of thing that some of us may or may not have done in the past. But like, you don't have to have that kind of job anymore.
I just
right?
spiked my coffee.
Yeah.
With that. No. Well, I think that's important. Like for me, I always thought like, oh, I'm going to go be an investment banker in one of these. Well, if you don't graduate from one of those T20 schools, good luck. But I went from strategy to ops, and I remember being like, well, what is ops? Well, it turns out it like fits everything we do in the military down to a T. Like, go tinker with something and figure out the most efficient or inefficient way to do things, and you get compensated pretty well for it. And I've loved that transition, and a lot of that has just kind of been born out of curiosity and pursuing different things. And I think don't silo yourself as, I was a trigger puller and therefore now I'm going to be security. Like, it's the worst thing people do to themselves. It's like, you're so much more than that. Pursue things. If you're at bigger organizations, Zach, you said it, like, don't be afraid to be like, man, I think my skills would be better served over here. A lot of times those places will be more than happy to move you into something. And don't be afraid of lateral moves. I think so many people think everything has to always be a step up. Sometimes it needs to be a step to the side for you to go up.
Yeah, your career is a marathon, not a sprint, right? Like it takes time. Like, be willing to do things that are maybe not, like you said, not the most linear progression. If you're super interested in a career field but you're not super qualified, take maybe a lower, paying job or a lower structured job, work your way up. Like if you're successful in the military, you'll be successful in civilian life. It just goes hand in hand, right? Like generally speaking, also if you're an asshole in the military, you're probably gonna be an asshole in civilian life too, right? So like it is direct correlation here, so if you were successful in the past, you'll be successful out in the real world too. So don't worry about it if, oh, I really wanted to be a senior program manager at Amazon. Like that's the job I want. Like don't do that job for one. Two, if going in comes in as like as an operations manager at Amazon or a project manager, something like that, work your way up. Like it's a marathon, not a sprint, and don't get discouraged.
And then the last thing I would point out is something Joe brought up is like when if you come from a land that's an all men's unit, I came from an all men's unit. And if your approach is, I don't know how to work with women, or I can't work with women, or I won't work with women, you're not indoctrinated to the military. You're just a piece of shit. So figure that out. Like my organization is 70% women. My VP I report to is a female. Her boss is a female. The CHRO, female. They're all brilliant and capable and badass in their own rights and deserve to be there. So if you're leaving the military with I can't work with females, or you're anti-uterus in some capacity, like you're just a turd. Like fuck off. Yeah. I'm sorry, bad word.
No, it's. I mean, I'm terrified. My girlfriend, like you watch her, and she'll, she's got this thing where she stamps her foot, and I'm like, uh-oh, here it comes. And she's as tough as they get. She deals with these guys in New York, and I'll just hear the funniest stuff that she'll say, and it's like these yahoos, and I'm like, wow, okay, are you sure you and I didn't cross paths in the military? Because I haven't heard that A, since I was in, and B, but that's the thing. Be respectful of your coworkers. Again, they all have experiences, and they're all tough in their own ways. Like people that have climbed the ladder and have done it, like mad respect, because they've fought their own battles. It's a different field of battle, but everyone has those skill sets, and you can always be learning from that. And it's just super cool to interact with that, because I think everyone here is intellectually curious. What you can learn from other people too is, I think, the best part of corporate. You just get to look around and do a little bit of the fishbowl thing and be like, that's cool. Fuck that. That's cool. All right.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on. We look forward to, continue to have you involved in some capacity. We want to do a full kind of like Q&A with enlisted vets here in the next couple months, where we have, any enlisted folk can come on and just, shoot the shit with you guys. So again, thank you all. Have a great night.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us on.